With 1 week left on the Frolova banner, I think now is a good time to take a look at who will be rerunning before the massive 2.6 banners drop. Now, the second half of the current version 2.5 will be Cantarella and Brant, who are two very strong and versatile characters. So in this video, we'll gauge how valuable they are to pull in the current meta, as well as if you're better off pulling Augusta or Iuno, which we will very briefly go over their kits because it is still pretty early into the beta. Now, let's start with Cantarella. So she is a Havoc Rectifier who plays as a buffer support coordinate attacker. She specifically buffs Havoc and skill damage. Her outro gives 20% and 25% respectively, but this is also on top of surprisingly good DPS. Being an off-field coordinate attacker is super useful, especially when pairing her with DPSs who need a lot of field time. But there is one more thing Cantarella can do, and that is provide consistent healing, which means she can fit into the healer slot. Although do keep in mind her healing is much less than Verena and Shorekeeper, plus putting her on Rejuvenating Glow lowers her DPS and support substantially. So in general, she can be your healer, but you're better off running her as a sub DPS. Now, let's look at what team comp she can fit in. So a lot of people seem to think she's only really locked to Frolova, and although that is her best comp, having a Havoc and skill buff does get you into a lot of different other comps. Jinshi Hypercarry is very good with Cantarella. She does provide those coordinate attacks, which Jinshi needs, and a skill buff, which she also needs. This comp with Verena can comfortably clear all the current tower adversity stages. Same with Carlotta Hypercarry. She benefits from the skill buff, Cantarella's consistent damage, and when running her on Empyrean Anthem, you get a nice little 20% attack bonus, another comp that comfortably clears. Of course, Danjin and Havoc Rover benefit as well, even Camellia too, so she's clearly extremely versatile, but the real question is if she's an upgrade over the alternatives, because sure, she works with Camellia, but Sanhua will always be better, and she's free. Jinshi has Juja, who's best, but the alternatives would be Yin Lin or Yuan Wu, so Cantarella is really worth it if you didn't pull for Juja. For Carlotta, again Juja, but this time Carlotta has no other real options. I mean, you could use Tao Chi, but good luck with that. If you don't have Juja, then Cantarella is the next best. She's an upgrade over all the other alternatives. If you're thinking of pulling Cantarella to support Danjin, then she is a massive upgrade. The only really good pairing for her, because the alternatives are pretty mid. Havoc Rover also gets value from her, but in general, Sanhua again will pull ahead, because Havoc Rover is more of a basic attacker, and Sanhua just has absolutely no field time. Now let's move on to her free-to-play viability and build difficulties. So what I mean by free-to-play viability is, does she really need other limited characters, and how are her weapon choices? So firstly, we've gone over her best comps. She fits in many places. She doesn't need anyone because she isn't looking to be buffed, even though her damage is great. She isn't like Carlotta or Zanny, whose only real options are one limited character. She doesn't need another 5-star, and for her weapon options, she has plenty of rectifiers that work. Her signature is okay, I'll talk more about it in a bit. Stringmaster is decent for damage, Cosmic Ripples, which is the standard, works on her, then Fusion Accretion or Jinjo Keeper are great free-to-play options. The performance difference is tiny comparing her sig to free-to-play options, because she's not the main DPS. But let's circle back to her signature, because that banner is also coming with her. So what Whispers of Sirens essentially does is have a massive crit damage stat, buffs basic attack, and ignores Havoc resistance. So what other rectifier user wants to be on field doing basic attacks? Well, no one. This cannot be used on anyone else. Its passive is specifically locked to Cantarella, and although you can put it on Frolova, Stringmaster will be better, so it's not very worth it. Now besides her weapon, she is pretty easy to build. Empyrean Anthem will generally be best, but she can use Moonlit, Rejuvenating Glow for healing, or Midnight Veil if you're using her with a Havoc DPS, and her stats are just the standard DPS build, although she does need a good amount of ER. So pros, cons, and overall value. Her pros are versatility, okay healing support, skill and Havoc buff, great personal damage for her support, really easy to build, doesn't need that one other limited character to unlock her potential, works great in all endgames, and most importantly, is future-proof, because we will continue to get Havoc and skill damage dealers, and for the people who don't have Shorekeeper, well, she fits in as a support, and who knows, maybe Kuro adds an endgame that requires more team comps to be built. Cons. Her best team comp is with Frolova, who is currently running, so if you pulled her, chances are you don't have enough for Cantarella, assuming you didn't get her on her release. She also has chunky ER requirements. If you choose to run her on full healing, her damage suffers a lot, and Juja just tends to be better a lot of the time. With all that being said, I do think she is a very valuable pull. Definitely not broken, but her versatility makes pulling her very worth it. She does not fall into the same trap of only being used for one specific DPS, like Phoebe and Zanny, for example. Moving on to Brant, a fusion sword wielder who provides healing, shielding buffs, and amazing personal damage. Now, let's look at his buffs. So besides his 20% fusion buff and 25% skill buff, he doesn't provide anything else, because yes, he does heal, so he can use the Rejuvenating Glow set and run Fallacy or Turtle, right? Well, not exactly. Since his personal damage is so good and reliant on energy regen, he is practically forced to run Tiebreaking Courage. So you will be trading damage from your main DPS to increase damage from Brant. Now with that being said, let's see the comps he fits into. Mono Fusion is by far his best and most fun. I mean, that's a given. Everyone buffs everyone. He does have a skill buff, so the skill DPSs we talked about before work. This time Jinshi is a little weird, because if you're running Juja, then Brant or Juja's buff will go wasted, buffing each other before Jinshi. But if you're running Yin Lin, then Yin Lin provides the coordinated attack, attacks while buffing Brant into Jinshi. It's a little weird, but it can clear TOA, and it's pretty fun. For Carlotta, he is very good because since Carlotta doesn't have many teammate options, all you have to do is slot in Sanhua for Brant, and this comp clears really well. Amazing synergy here. Even putting Verena or Shorekeeper in works as well. Frolova gets a ton of value because a lot of her damage is skill damage, and with her short field time, Brant's lengthier field time isn't as bad. The problem is the third slot. Maybe a quick swap Changli, Cantarella, Danjin. Either way, they're great. Now for all the fusion characters, he's sometimes best in slot because he's competing with Changli and Lupa. Only Encore benefits from Lupa's basic buff, whereas Changli's Liberation buff is better for both Mortifi and Lupa. However, both Qixia and Changli really wants Brant's skill buff, because that's a good chunk of their damage. He can also be your main DPS, which is great because he's super fun to play. Slap him on with Sanhua for a basic buff and Verena, and this comp will clear everything super comfortably. His playstyle is super simple, which is great. Now, how free-to-play friendly is he, and how hard is it to build him? Firstly, his weapon options are complete garbage. Not free-to-play friendly at all if you're not getting his signature. Every other option falls off super hard. Overture is the only other energy regen sword in the game currently, of course, unless you want to run the 3-star Voyager, which I mean, if you don't have Overture, just use a stat stick at that point. Either way, he has almost no solid weapon options, and then for his build, you only really want tie breaking. The fusion sets and healing sets are all worse on him because his personal damage is such a big chunk of the team damage, it's like you only want to build tie breaking. And then on top of that, he needs a massive 280% energy regen to max out his passive, but that's also while getting crit stats for, again, his damage. So he converts ER into attack, which gives him a crazy amount, but he does still need to crit. So he is, in my opinion, the hardest character to build. That being said, his set is paired with the Spectro set. That's a nice little bonus. It's not really painful farming this passive field, unlike the Lingering Tunes Rejuvenating one. I don't know. Why is that even there? Like, who's farming that? Just farm the other ones. But anyways, a big problem is he's hard to build if you're not getting his sig. And speaking of his signature, if you are gonna get it, it cannot be used on anyone else. You would only ever use it on Brant. So it's a super low value weapon pull. It's really only worth it if you're going all in on Brant and you really just want to make him even more broken. Not needed, but useful. So with all that being said, his pros are versatility, just like Cantarella, although a little less so. He is future-proof because we will undoubtedly get more fusion DPSs. Super casual friendly to play. You just basic attack until full forte, and then click abilities when they're up. He frees the healer slot, so you can put your Shorekeeper or Verena on other comps, which is a big plus. Just so you guys know, TOA is getting 2 more middle tower floors, so y'all better invest in those team comps. Amazing TOA unit, great personal damage for a support, and a perfect fit for arguably the strongest comp in the game, Mono Fusion. Cons, terrible to build. Almost needs his signature, although you can clear everything with Overture. It's just gonna be a pain. Not as good for Whimpering Wastes, because he has no grouping, and a lot of his damage is tied to one big hit, which is bad for the multi-waves. Although this is not a problem in Mono Fusion, because Lupo and Changli make up for those issues. Regardless, if you get around his build issues, there are pretty much no downsides. I rank him as a broken unit for your account. It's one of my favorites. You can put him almost anywhere, and it will always increase the team's damage output, especially against this dumbass boss who literally can't get hit by most characters, decides to fly everywhere, freeze everything, has a shield, like what? Okay, let's just move on. But the final thing I want to talk about is whether or not your account is better off saving for Augusta or Iuno. Now, their kits are still pretty early in development, so some things may change, but from what we know, Augusta will be an Electro Broadblade user, and heavy attacks will be a huge source of her damage. But it seems she'll be a main DPS / dual DPS because she is a damage dealer with a weird outro that provides 15% amp to all elements. I mean, that makes her somewhat universal. She also provides a small shield, but that's just for some comfort. It's nowhere near enough to run her as a support, so she's just an Electro DPS that wants Electro and heavy buffs. Iuno, on the other hand, is more of a sub DPS Arrow Gauntlet user who buffs specifically heavy attacks, only heavy. She just does damage, and her outro is a 50% heavy amp. So I will say this, since Zhang Liao is still very broken, Augusta doesn't have a ton of value, which is unfortunate. She's getting the Zanny treatment, amazing character design, super fun to play, but from a meta perspective, isn't a super valuable pull because there's so many alternatives. Iuno, however, provides the biggest heavy attack buff in the game, which is crazy. She'll be Jian's new best in slot, Augusta's best in slot, no support Zanny's best in slot, so with Phoebe in the third, DPS Phoebe's best in slot, and even DPS Rocha's best in slot buffer. Iuno is stupid broken. So from a purely meta perspective, Iuno is the best value pull. Then I put Cantarella and Brant before Augusta. Since her best buffer is running right after her, pulling her without Iuno will be a little rough. That being said, running a dual DPS Augusta Zhang Liao doesn't sound too bad. Plus Augusta's design power keeps everyone else. I mean, she's clearly the coolest looking character in the game. But that's about it. Crazy banners coming up. I'm way too broke to get these characters. Kuro, please add more 4 stars.